Hi, welcome back. We're doing the second video of Unit 8, Day 3. We're talking about rotations. And remember, we're rotating around the origin, and we're going to rotate in 90-degree increments counterclockwise. We have rules that we've looked at last time. For a 90-degree rotation, you take your original pre-image, xy, and it becomes the opposite of yx. For 180 degrees, your pre-image, xy, rotates to the image of the opposite of x, the opposite of y. Your pre-image for 270 of xy rotates to the image of y, the opposite of x. And again, remember, I never said negative x or negative y, because we want to remember it doesn't have to be a negative number. It means it's going to be the opposite of what you were given. If you don't have a negative in front of it, then you keep it exactly as it is. If it was already negative, it stays negative. When you see the opposite, it changes to the opposite sign. So let's look at our first example. It says rotate quadrilateral ABCD 90 degrees about the origin. Okay, so when I look at this 90 degrees, my rule says the opposite of y, x. So I'm just going to write that down so I don't forget. The opposite of y, x. So I'm going to look at my y value. My y value is 1, so the opposite of 1 is negative 1. And then x, negative 3, stays a negative 3. Even though that isn't negative, it stays what it is in the original point. Okay? Point B, the opposite of y, so the opposite of 3 is negative 3. X is negative 3, so we're going to stay negative 3. Okay? C, 1, 3, the opposite of y, so negative 3. X is 1, so it stays a positive 1. Here, 1, 1, the opposite of y is 1, the opposite of 1 is negative 1. X is 1. So then I'm going to graph these points as new xy coordinates. So A prime, remember your prime notation says this is the one we've done something to. So A prime, negative 1, negative 3, negative 1, negative 3. This is A prime. B prime, negative 3, negative 3, negative 3, negative 3. B prime, I know A and B get connected. C prime, negative 3, 1, negative 3, 1. It's okay that it's where A was. They just share that point. And then D prime, negative 1, 1, negative 1, 1. D prime. Okay, so if I look at my original figure, if I were to put a heart right here, right at negative 1, 2, right in the very center of this long rectangle, and then I rotated, and I went negative 1, 2, and I put a heart there, it would still be in the center of the new rectangle. It just rotated that rectangle 90 degrees. Okay, I had a long skinny rectangle where most of it was in the second quadrant, 2 boxes were in the first quadrant, and when I rotate I get the same thing. Most is in the second quadrant, 2 boxes in the upper right first quadrant. Okay, there's my 90-degree rotation using the rule negative y, x. Okay, let's look at another example. Alright, so here we're going to rotate quadrilateral ABCD 270 degrees about the origin. Okay, so when I look at this, I'm going to go back and look at what is that rule for 270 degrees. So I'm going to pull my first sheet of notes in and say, okay, for 270 degrees, my pre-image point rotates to y, the opposite of x. So I'm going to write that down, y, the opposite of x. Okay, so my y value here is 2. It doesn't change signs. Then I want the opposite of x. Well, 0, I can't have a negative 0. So the opposite of 0 is still just 0. Okay? The next point, y, my y value here is 4. The opposite of x is 1, so it becomes negative 1. Okay? C, 6, 4, Y is 4. The opposite of X is 6, so it becomes negative 6. The opposite of 6 is negative 6. Y is 2. Then the opposite of X is going to be the opposite of 5 is negative 5. Now when I look at this figure, ABCD is in quadrant 1. If I rotate 3 times for 270, so 1, 2, 3 times for 270, my quadrant 1 is now here. So I kind of expect to see my shape to be a horizontal parallelogram here. So it should be this direction. It should be long this way, which means when I come back here, it should look like a long parallelogram this way. Let's graph and see. A prime is at 2, 0. A prime. Notice they're both on the axes. 1, 4 becomes 4, negative 1. 4, negative 1 is B prime. C prime is 4, negative 6. Right on the edge of the graph, just like C was. And then D prime is at 2, negative 5. D prime. Notice it's exactly where we expected it to be. Okay? All right, we're going to come back in the next video and we're going to do one more example with 180 degrees, and then we're going to discuss rotational symmetry. All right, thanks so much for watching.